I know the job career ain't for me, but I know recovery is for me. So let me give all my energy to that. I've never done that. I've done it in seasons, when I was in between jobs and stuff like that, but never full-fledged job. So I was like, all right, let me do this full-fledged job and see what happens. So I did that, and man, God started putting the right people, the right places, the right resources around me. I was ashamed about the lack of control. I was ashamed at how much it had gotten out of control, and how in a lot of ways I couldn't even really recognize myself. Because a lot of times that relapse is somewhat necessary in order to get the lesson that one needs to go, in order to, maybe that first streak was 90 days or 120 days, whatever the case may be, but that way that you were going wasn't sustainable for 5 years. It wasn't sustainable for 10 years. And that relapse might have taught you that lesson in order to make that, to get to that long-term goal.
Greetings all. Welcome back to Living Once Twice, the place where we rewrite narratives, reinvent ourselves, and reimagine our lives. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Before we dive in, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also YouTube. Give us a follow too on Instagram at Living Once Twice, where you can view great content on all of our amazing guests, including the guest that I'll bring on today, which is Donovan Jones. Donovan is a sex addiction educator, liberator, self-love advocate, and founder of SyncUpHealUp. Donovan's life mission and purpose is to help people of color experience victory and freedom in their fight against sex addiction and compulsive behaviors. He's also a graduate of Howard University School of Law and is currently getting his PhD in human sexuality from the California Institute of Integral Studies. Through sharing his own personal testimony, he is passionate about breaking the silence, stigma, and shame associated with sexual addiction, and supporting individuals in their recovery journey through outreach, education, and connection. Donovan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm Lord and blessed, man. Glad to be here, man. I appreciate you having me.
Definitely. And always like to give the audience a little context, but you and I, we just met through our shared recovery journey. And being in a lot of these spaces, sometimes you don't see a lot of Black men and people of color in particular.
Agree.
And so when you reached out, I was like, yo, this is divine to be able to like connect and chat with you, because I feel there's a sharedness in the journey, but this is like what I hope, a real and vulnerable conversation that many men aren't having, but I'm hoping are encouraged to have, to reach out and to get support and help with.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. I believe it's divine, just from the timing of everything, and how, his interests just naturally align. So looking forward to having this conversation,
Yeah.
brother.
So there's a lot of areas I want to talk about, because we'll talk about like 12 steps is and a lot of the different acronyms of the different type of programs and how people can maybe determine what might be a good fit for them to explore. But where I want to start is just learning a little bit more about your background and journey. So if you don't mind, just sharing with the audience a little bit more about like who you are and your journey, but then also as it relates to your journey in terms of the road of recovery and what sexual
Hmm.
compulsive behaviors look like for you, and what was that turning point where you determined to yourself like, hey, I want to seek help for this?
Yeah, of course, I can do that for sure. So, me, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, on the West Side. And, I grew up in a time in the city where, you kind of had the opportunity to, be exposed to a lot of, different things, unhealthy and healthy, but the unhealthy things, like the different types of drug abuse and things of that nature. I was privy to a lot of that growing up. And so I always told myself, like, I saw the effects of it. And I said, man, I just can't do that. Like, whatever path I go down in life, just as a child, I just always told myself, like, I have to do everything in my power to make sure that that's not the path that that I go down. And so, for me, man, I would say I guess struggle and journey with with sexuality and recovery just started when I was about 10, 11. And for me, man, it was always just about, at least initially about, let me see, not always, but it was initially about being accepted. It was about being accepted, man, feeling validated. I was always the youngest within my group for the most part. And so, at least in my neighborhood. And so, the older homies, they were, exploring their sexuality and things of that nature. And I didn't want to feel like ostracized or out the loop or anything like that. So, I just, kind of followed right behind them, even though I wasn't even in puberty yet at the time, and they were. But that wasn't stopping me from trying. That wasn't stopping my lack of trying at all. So, I just stayed with it and was around it, and started with pornography, and from there, just eventually I was able to have my own sexual experience, with the orgasm and everything, and man, for real, I was hooked from the jump. Like I didn't know that at the time, but for me at the time, it was the best feeling I had ever felt up until my life. I had got the acceptance that I wanted because I felt so out of place because they were talking about climaxes, orgasms, things like that, and I hadn't crossed that path yet. So I felt like, all right, I could finally connect with them now. And then also I had this great feeling that I had never felt before. And so for me, from then, I just became any opportunity that I could to, watch pornography and masturbate. And I never looked at it like it was, a problem or anything because, all the guys were doing it. So, it was normal. And for me, it just really became such an answer to anything, good, feeling bad, happy, sad. It didn't really matter. It was just always there, always there for me. And so, I was obsessed from the jump. I didn't realize until I got older and realized that, when I look back on that time, but that obsession and that craving was always there from the very beginning. It was never enough. Never. Like I was big early out the gate. And so that just stayed as I went through middle school and I went through high school and I went through college, and then I'll just can speak for our cultures, but in ours, just to be candid, like you know, sex when it comes to like men is a sport at times, and that's how we treat it. Like if it's a lot of our self worth and who we are and our value is either rooted in one or both of how much money we have, how much access we have to women, and they tend to go hand in hand. And that was my experience growing up. So going through high school, started to have sexual experiences, and in college as well. And so for me, it was still normal. I didn't really see anything abnormal about it, even with the amount of time that I was spending with. Yeah, I was having some different like anxiety issues when it came to like actually performing. And I just thought, I just needed to get comfortable. I didn't know that was really, I could trace that to my addiction and not being able to be intimate with an actual, woman, because my brain had been so desensitized to that because of all the pornography that I was watching. And so we go through college, and it wasn't really until I got to the end of college that I, had to start to look at myself and say, oh, this may actually be a problem, because that was when it took a leap. And you know how this addiction progresses. So for me, that was the time where it took another leap, and I started to do things I just never saw myself doing in any way. And it was like, oh, okay, but I still didn't think of it as like what it actually is, which is a life or death type of thing. It was like, oh man, this is a bad habit. This is a bad habit that I need to get rid of. So from there, it progressed into for me, that's where the whole self-help journey. And I think most of us go through that before we get help outside of ourselves. So for me, it was the podcast, it was the videos, it was the books, it was the self-help coaches, it was all of those things. So I went down that path, and meanwhile I'm going down this path, my addiction is progressing for sure. Like the time, energy, the riskiness of the behaviors is all growing while I'm doing this. But up to this point, I've coming from where I'm come from, I've had success in life. And I've always been able to will myself through it, any challenge. So for me, I was telling myself like this will be absolutely no different. Why would it be? You know? And so I'm continuing to go down this path. I'm learning a lot, but I'm not getting any sobriety or anything like that. And so I'm continuing on. And then fast forward to 2018. And then in 2018, man, that was when I realized, like, oh, it can get worse. It can always get worse. And it had been getting worse in other ways, prior to that point. But in 2018, it just took a whole nother leap, and I reached a new bottom. And for me, it was a sort of reality check where it was like, okay, like this ain't working. I've been trying this route for years, by myself. I had tried, different therapists and stuff like that, but none of them really got it, at the time. And most of them I didn't really feel comfortable being 100% vulnerable with anyway. And so, but, and at that time, that was when I pretty much hit that new low, and it was like, okay, I have to try something different. So I searched on the internet, and I found a 12-step room, and that was my introduction into that space. And so I feel like my back was against the wall. I didn't feel like I had any other choice at that point. I was so isolated; nobody knew what I was going through, and it was just it was killing me slowly. And I had to come to that realization. And so I went to that room, man, and I was scared. I was terrified. My heart was beating so fast. And then I got in the room, and they were welcoming. They were supportive. At the same time, I didn't feel like it was my place, because, as you know, there's not a lot of us that look like us, in the room. And that definitely wasn't the case in that room. And also in that specific room at the time, there wasn't a lot of sobriety. So there were people in there, but they were just kind of sharing, what we call in the room, like war stories.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was, this is cool because at least I'm not alone, but I don't know if this is for me either. So went back, left out that room, and just continued on the same journey. And you already know how this goes, hit a new low, and was like, okay, well, my way definitely ain't working. So at least let me go back and try a different room, and then that's when I found a different room. And then that actually became my home group for the next couple of years. And wasn't getting necessarily the traction I wanted from a sobriety standpoint, but I did break the isolation, which I'm forever grateful for, because from there it's only, been able to progress.
Yeah. And Donovan, I'm grateful for you again, just to be so open and honest, because powerful testimonies like yours are what more of us men need, and that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation. But I want to hold space for some of the things that you shared about your journey, because I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people and a lot of men in particular when it comes to this specifically, because none of us just show up with these compulsive behaviors. Like, hearing your story, if we trace back the beginning roots of it all, for so many of us, it didn't start in our 20s or our 30s. It started in our preteen years, our exposure of just the societal things that we grow up in, what we're seeing on television, music, seeing around us, and that's all things that are being glorified. Because your story, I'm like very similarly of the male circles and my brothers, and seeing what my uncles and my dad, and just kind of those behaviors. It's like, oh, this is normal. Being to porn, or hearing about people being promiscuous with other women, especially if they're in a relationship, that just kind of being normalized. And so there's that piece of a young forming brain that this is okay, because no one's questioning it, everyone's doing it. But then there's that aspect too, is we're going through just a adolescence. We all want to be accepted. We want to be seen, heard, validated in some way. And so many of us walk around with these kind of emotional wounds and voids. And then we find this type of behavior to be the filler for that, unfortunately. And at that time, we're not connecting the dots of what the
Yeah,
road that
definitely
this is
not.
going to take us on if we stay down it. But for us, it's like, in that moment, it does feel validating. It does feel good. Like, there's that physical part that you talk about, of like the physical sense that we get, but then there's also the emotional kind of psychological piece that it feels of, like, validating and accepting. It's like, why would I not want to do more of this or explore more of this? And again, we know kind of the rabbit hole it brings us down. And so I wanted to highlight that. Something I wanted to also unpack is the impacts that this was having, because you talked about how, like, as it progressed, you were seeing it impact maybe you were doing riskier things, or the time that you were spending on doing things. And I want people to understand that, because we know sex addiction or lust addiction, many people can at first bat their eye and be like, what do you mean? Like, you're just someone who wants to have a lot of sex. But I don't think they really understand some of the impacts of the behavior that it can have on us. And so if you don't mind speaking, like, yeah, when you say, like, what were some of those impacts that it was having on you? Were you getting stuck in guilt and shame? Were you finding that, like, time that you meant to spend doing something else, you were finding yourself doing like hours, as in my case, hours on porn, or spending Friday, Saturday nights up till wee hours of the morning looking for the next porn video, and thinking like, and spending hours doing
Mm-hmm.
that. So just curious if you don't mind sharing too, so people can helping paint that picture of like, hey, these type of behavioral addictions, these are some of the impacts, especially when it comes to compulsive sex behavior.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. So for me, there came a realization of a lack of control. And for me, that's the difference, because some people can have, a problem, or, even a heavier issue with it, but not necessarily be, addicted per se. But for me, it was that lack of control. Like, I could say it's going to be an hour, and then it turned into, 16 hours. I could say, I'm only going to do it on these days, and now I could say, all right, I'm gonna do it on the weekends, and now it's been a week straight, and that was when I had to, kind of start to look at it differently and say, okay, maybe this isn't normal, because I can't really control it. And then just from a emotional standpoint, just throughout the time, I don't think there's a low vibrational frequency emotion that I did not feel, or I haven't felt as a result of this. So, the anxiety, the depression, the loneliness that comes with it, because, as I'm going through this, I'm sure you can speak to this as well. It's not like I'm talking to anybody about it. So I'm dealing with it in isolation. So I'm dealing with the impact, the consequences of it all. Like you kind of mentioned earlier, like for me, it got to a point where I couldn't, a lot of times I couldn't really go socialize before. I had to act out before. And then depending on how the experience went, I was going to come back and do it, afterwards. And so it just got so ingrained, and, just in my day to day. And that came with a lot of, guilt, because I knew I wasn't showing up as my best self in a lot of spaces where, even though how I was showing up was fine, it was getting me by. And, the unmanageability part hadn't came yet. I just knew if I wasn't spending all my time on this, I could be even better and greater at what it was I was, trying to show up for. So, between friends and family and responsibilities, it was always there. And man, like how people have, smoke breaks and stuff like that. Like I had acting out breaks. Like I like that was really a part of, helping me get through a lot of tough, tough challenges in my life. Just, from childhood all the way up, to my adulthood. It became my coping mechanism. It became my escape. It became my medicine. And so for me, I would say the biggest one that I definitely felt for the longest time, and that's why being on here with you is such a moment for me, because the shame was number one by far. I was just so ashamed, because it was like, damn, how did I get here? You know, like you said, when we picked this up in our early days, it's not like I'm making a conscious decision to make this be the center of my life at the time. And so for me, it was like, how did I even get here? And then shit, I'm ashamed because I can't get out. And I've been able to will myself through a lot of stuff. I won't cuss, but I
Hey,
will be
hey,
able to
be
will
honest.
myself through a
It's
lot of
okay.
stuff.
We got you on this.
Cool, cool. No, I want to make sure, but yeah, I will myself through a lot of shit. You feel me, get to get where I had gotten to, and I'm like, no, damn, this is the one area in my life where this is not working. Like, what's wrong with me? Like how am I go move forward? You know what I mean? Like if I'm hitting this wall. And so I was ashamed about the lack of control. I was ashamed how much it had gotten out of control, and how in a lot of ways I couldn't even really recognize myself. And the biggest thing was, man, I'm just ashamed that the biggest, most important thing to me, I still became it. And that was hard for me to accept. Because as I mentioned earlier, like, growing up how I grew up, I saw a lot of addiction, just I was around it. And so for me, it was like, I won't become that. I swore off it, and then I look up, years later, and what am I? I'm an addict. And that gave me, that just made me feel so low and so ashamed, you feel me, of like, man, like, how did I get here? And on top of that, I can't get myself out. And it's getting worse, day to day. And it's getting worse to the point that I don't know where it's headed, because I'm already in a land where I didn't plan to be. And so I have no idea, where this is going. So, man, it was such a big impact on me. Even with the swearing off, it was like I swear off, swear, I'm done, and trying to do all these things, and next thing you know, I'm back at it, and I'm back at it worse. And so it was just a vicious ass cycle that I was caught in, and really, had no way of getting out. And meanwhile, at the same time, life is still progressing. Like, I'm going through school, I'm working, I'm, doing all these things, helping my family out. So I'm doing all these things that I set out to do, but it's all being compromised at the same time. And I'm doing it, and I'm dealing with it solo dolo. So that just really, that really caused a lot of problems for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, no, you had a couple things there that I wanna take a time to amplify. First, talking about how, this was the answer to like a lot of emotional things that were going on, whether it was sadness, whether it was depression, anxiety, and many of us turn. And it makes perfect sense. Like you speaking of like, hey, before you would go out, you might needed to act out, and depending how things would go, you might need it to act out as a form of that emotional regulation, which I think for people they can relate to. I know I can, because for me, with with pornography, for example, or compulsive masturbation, it's like, hey, if I can't sleep, I need to do this. If I can't, if I'm stressed out about something, I need to turn to this. So it becomes then this unhealthy, as you called it, coping mechanism or tool that we're using to navigate life. And so there's an aspect there, but then there's that repetitive piece too. You talk about this vicious cycle of like, I'm going to swear it off. Maybe you come to your senses, your clarity, whether it's, in the case of like porn, for example, I'm going to delete my library. I'm not going to hop on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, hours later, right back at it, or whatever it might be. And just for people to understand that unmanageability of it, like this is kind of us painting the picture of like, that's what it looks like. And so many folks, to another point that you mentioned, they're going through this vicious cycle behind closed doors in isolation. However, when they've got to show up to their job, to family and friends, to school, there's like this other mask that they're putting on, but then they know behind closed doors what's going
Mm-hmm.
on. So how, like that part of the, you're showing up for your family, you're showing up for school, but then knowing that, man, you're struggling with this is going on. Like you talked about just the difficulty of that, but anything you want to speak to of just that feeling of quote unquote living a, like, do you feel like you were living a double life?
Most certainly. Most certainly. Not only feeling like it, I knew I was. And that added to the shame, part, because I mean, just just being, I mean, you understand, just being black men, and being educated, and everything that comes along with that. Like, we are examples at the end of the day. We have a lot of influence, within our families and within our communities. And so for me, I just, it's like, damn, like, not only am I hurting myself, but I'm hurting the people that, look up to me, and the people that, that look for me for, inspiration, guidance, whatever, support, whatever the case may be. I'm not showing up as my best self, despite how hard, I tried to do that. So that was adding to it. And as you mentioned, just that unmanageability piece, it got to a point where I couldn't show up, and that made me feel even more terrible. It was like, damn, like, I used to could, get through these periods of my life, whether it was a stressful time at work or a difficult time at school or difficult times within my relationships, and not have to go to that the way I was doing it. But then that progressed, and so now that's starting to suffer. Like every aspect of my life started to suffer, and that wasn't always the case. So that's also that let me know, like, oh, this is a real thing, and this is making me different from somebody else. And because it's all progressing and it's bleeding over and it's getting harder and harder to show up, as that other person. And yeah, man, it just had me in such a dark place, in a chokehold, and where I really felt like my life was in the balance. Like I had a lot of things that were going well, but I was risking it all every day. It's like, damn, like I have all these blessings and all these opportunities, and I'm literally throwing it away. I'm risking throwing it away every day,
That's
because that's where my acting out had gotten to.
Yeah, no, not that's sorry to cut you off. I was just saying, like that self-sabotage part. It is so real,
Yeah.
and what comes to the surface is something you talked about. Like you used that phrase of like it's killing you slowly. So it's like it takes over slowly. This addiction starts off
Hmm.
as you're doing it occasionally, periodically, and then all of a sudden it's becoming routine and habit. But then it's also like we're thinking, all right, just spending a couple of hours of doing something or whatever the acting out behavior is. But it does kill us slowly. It kills away at our spirit and our soul. And what happens on the inside manifests itself on the outside as it takes away from our loved
Exactly.
ones, our relationship, our ability to show up in other spaces and aspects of our life. And so like again, I'm grateful for you, like for really painting that picture for people because we know this is what a lot of our fellow brothers and sisters as well, because women go through it, are kind of going through the
Yes, of
erosion
course.
this thing can have on someone. So as you were starting to also share your story, you talked about how like, all right, you hit this point of your rock bottom and surrender, and then you started to turn to the rooms, and you were speaking about your experience in the 12-step rooms. That's kind of where I want to go next because I feel that for folks hear about 12 steps, they can have these like there's misconceptions about it, what it is, what it isn't. And so anything you just want to share, just from because I think education is so important here. Like, what would you
Yeah, I'd
share with
agree.
people about like what 12 steps is and what 12 steps isn't?
Yeah, I can definitely speak. I can definitely speak to that. So for me, it was a way to break the isolation. It was an opportunity to be around other individuals with a shared experience within a space for myself that I just felt so alone in. And so yeah, I might be the only, to be in Canada, I might be, the only, person of color in this room, but, I might be the youngest person in this room at the time. But at least I can bank on the fact that, they understand what it is I'm going through. And from my experience and honestly the at this point, what the 6 years I've been in the rooms, it's been for the most part, very accepting, very welcoming, allowing me to share my story and hearing other people's stories and seeing myself in other people's stories and getting that experience, strength, and hope because it was working for people. And I won't say it was working for as many people as I would have hoped at the time, but there were people that I could see that it was helping. So it did give me, some side of hope when I didn't really have any at the time. And that's really what kept me coming back. It took me a while to like actually commit, wholeheartedly to the room and the program and everything. But it was definitely a safe space for me. And what I can say that it's not. I think I heard you speak to this as well on one of your other episodes was, and it's not a replacement for professional help by no means if you need it. Like we're all individualized expressions within this within this world. So what works for me may not work for somebody else, and vice versa. But from a professional help standpoint, it definitely wasn't that, but it definitely provided support where therapy necessarily wouldn't. I can't call my therapist at 3 in the morning when I'm at this ATM. About to spend money I don't have. Like who can I call? I could probably call somebody in the room that I have a good relationship with. and at the same time, on the other end, when it talks about, certain traumas and things like that, a peer person probably doesn't have the training or the necessary, skills in order to help me process that in a healthy way. They might have it to an extent, but not to the level of a professional. So I would definitely say that it's not that, but it is take, you can kind of take what you need and leave the rest. And I did that for a while. Like most of my time in the rooms, I wasn't like working the program. I was just coming to not be alone at time. Just be real. Like I was coming to like break the isolation and not have to deal with it, by myself. And so that was the role that served me for a long time until recently, where I actually became willing to work it with a sense of desperation, as it speaks about.
Yeah, but no, the building blocks of kind of helping someone in their recovery. I'm glad you kind of like broke that down, and we're just honest. And like the first part of it was going to a space where you wouldn't be alone, because we know the isolation part is very paralyzing for so many of us. And then going to a space where you can be accepted, because we know that the stories are shared. Each of us can find a part of ourselves in someone's story, regardless of their race, color, creed, background, whatever it might be,
Hmm.
age. And that's how
Exactly.
powerful these rooms are for people to like go check out a couple different rooms. But one of the things I know that can be overwhelming, however, in the space is that there's so many iterations of it. There's there's
Oh yeah,
SS, there's
for sure.
SAA, there's SLAA. There's so many others. So like, how could someone determine what's the best fit from them? Like, what would you offer to help someone navigate
Man, to my count, I've counted like
that?
seven different different ones, and I don't know if that really exists for any other type of problem of this skill. To be real, I don't know if it's that many, but man, from my experience and my journey, the biggest differences between them all is number one, the terminology, and then number two, the emphasis. And they all have their own different emphasis. I would say, like, some emphasize the relationship piece of the acting out. So the codependency, the seeking love and validation, within relationships. And in those particular rooms, you'll find more people that deal with that have to deal with that particular type of problem versus, pornography or anything like that. Then you got some that's strictly, pornography. You have some that are strictly, focused on like the edging behaviors. You have some that are more religious based than others. You have some that are more inclusive than others. And man, it was a journey for me, bro. It was really a journey to like figure out, what space was right for me. And I'm grateful for the time I spent within the first program, but that was the wrong program. And I spent 2 years there just because I had just built myself up enough to go in that room. So I definitely didn't have the willingness to start going to all these other different programs trying to see it, because I was holding on to this one for dear life. And so I already felt bad about myself enough that I was, I didn't have the willingness to go to do any more, at least at that time. And so, yeah, I would say those are the main differences, because you'll find a lot of people, there's a lot of synergy across them all, obviously, because it's all sexual energy at the end of the day. And that's, that ties to a lot of the work that I do with a SyncUpHealUp, is the fact that it is, it's sexual energy at the end of the day. And so prioritizing that, but I understand, because there's a need for different, it's all individualized. So we have to find which one works for us. And that's a journey, man. That's a process in itself. And it doesn't necessarily say that on the surface either. It's kind of something that you got to experience and feel for yourself, and just have the willingness and faith to put yourself out there until you find the right fit. Like, and that's also a part of like the work I do as well, because I just saw our people, man, like winging it for real.
Mhm.
Like, and it's already not a lot of us in there. And so for me, it was like, okay, let's simplify this process for people, because and give them the resources and the tools, and have them be able to have direct contact with people that are in all these different fellowships, or at least know about them, so that they don't have to go through this trial and error by fire, so they can avoid, a lot of that time and energy. Because a lot of times, like I feel like I spent more time trying to find the right space than I did actually working on the healing part, and that can get taxing in itself. And so I just didn't want to see that happen anymore. So that's a big part of big part of what we do at Sahoo.
Yeah. So thanks for kind of breaking that down for people. Like, hey, sometimes you just gotta like test them all out to figure out like what's your fit with all the different variations that there are. And with respect to what you were just talking about with Sync Up Heal Up, that's what I wanted to talk next about was in the midst of all of this, you and your own recovery journey and healing journey and battle. When did that point come for you? If you want to speak a little bit more about like, hey, there's
Mm-hmm.
purpose in this. Was it the fact that you weren't seeing a lot of people in
Mm-hmm.
the rooms? Like, what was going on that kind of led to you wanting to then, put the essentially create this as like a life mission and purpose helping others heal in this specific area?
So for me, the not that first room that I went in, but the second room in 2019, a big reason why I kept coming back because there was one black guy, older black guy that was in the room, and consistently I would say at least, and he had just turned the corner, maybe like a month or two before I came, and he told me he had been around for a decade, but it was the fact that okay, I see somebody that I could really connect with. I know I would connect with him in and out of the rooms. Like we're still close to this day. And then my first sponsor was black as well. And he kept it so raw with me and he cut me, you know? And it was such and I had to accept it, because he told me the truth and it was really coming from a place of, I wouldn't even say tough love, but it was love and, a reality that he told me like, the way you going and where you at, the willingness just ain't there. So we'd just be, going through the motions and, I don't really do that. He had been around for a while. And, I really even though it didn't work out, I really appreciated the realness, that he shared with me. And so for me, it was like, okay, at least I can be that person because as we learn in the room, we don't necessarily have to be fully recovered in order to be a service. So that was always in the back of my mind. I've always been a reach while I climb type of guy in anything that I've ever done. And so I knew that on this journey, it will ultimately be no different, but I didn't know what that looked like per se. And then when was that? Was that it might have been it might have been just either 23 or 24 hours. I think no, it's 23. It's 23. Kendrick, Mr. Morale. Man, bro, I cried for like 3 days straight. I cried for like 3, 4 days straight. Off the strength of that album, bro, because it was my first time hearing somebody speak about it, speak about their struggle in that way where it's like, oh no, I feel you. Like I would, I don't know whether he was in the room or not, but he would be a person, you would see in the room. And it was like, oh, like, and he's so taboo and stigmatized that it's not talked about. You might hear people talk about it within a certain religious space or something like that, but not as a culture, And he was speaking about it from a culture perspective. And it just it hit me so hard that it was like, damn, like I have to do this now, because I know I wasn't the only one that he was touching like this and I saw it, and so for me it was like, okay, I know this, I know even more. This is what this is what I'm called to do. But, in the midst of that, I'm still struggling, you know? And so for me, it was like, okay, I know I'm going to do it, but I still don't know what it looks like. But now I feel even more compelled to do it. Because it's not just for myself, before our people as well. And I saw our people in the room struggling while this was happening, so that even that made it resonate even more. And then I would say maybe later on that year, I committed to going on an ayahuasca journey, and for me, it was life changing because I had hit a wall spiritually. And you and I both know from being in the rooms, like even those rooms, it's a spiritual program. You know, at the end of the day, not a religious one, but spiritual programs. And so for me, in the rooms, I had got me, something, but I had yet to really find out what spirituality looked like for me. I had went on my own journey and went to different, spaces and, and temples and everything, churches. Like literature. I went on my own journey. None of it ever really resonated with me to the core. I always felt like I was trying to like fit a square into a rectangle or something like that. And so for me, going on that journey, it allowed me to find my spirituality. It really was not the first time, but it was the realest time that I had, with for me, which is God and my spirit. It was for me. It was like sitting down at dinner or sitting down, at a bar, like just having a conversation. And I had never had that before. And so it came with so much awareness and clarity that I got told, like, look, this is like what you've been doing is cool. Like you going to law school, you working in, keep or in corporate legal finance is cool, but this ain't what I put you here to do, bro. Like, it's a part of it, it's necessary, but it ain't what I put you here to do. And so he didn't even necessarily tell me what it was to do, but he just said, read the light, fight the dark. And just but the message that just kept coming and kept coming, like my spirit just wanted to make sure that I understood it. And so from there I came back and knew that I was probably up against the clock within the space I was in. And eventually I got the courage, to leave. And at this time I'm still having significant challenges, to be honest. Not as bad as not as bad as they once were. Yeah, thanks to the support and resources I have, but not the motion that I would have liked to have. And so it got to a point where I was like, okay, I know the job career ain't for me, but I know recovery is for me. So let me give all my energy to that. I've never done that. I've done it in seasons, when I was in between jobs and stuff like that, but never full-fledged job. So I was like, all right, let me do this full-fledged job and see what happens. So I did that, and man, God started putting the right people, the right places, the right resources around me, and I started to get real traction for the first time in my life, significant traction. And then from there it was like, okay, like I'm still talking to other people. I'm finding the spaces, where Black people are. There's so many programs, we're in there, but we're just so scattered. And then even within the rooms, we don't necessarily have rooms specifically for us to be our true authentic selves all the time, unfortunately. And so, but once I started to find those spaces and see more people, struggling, it was like, okay, like this winging it is dead. Like this us winging it is not gonna work. And people are finding individual success, but we're not finding collective success. And so that was really what sparked it. It was, it was me saying to myself, like, man, like this is just gonna continue on from generation to generation, like it's been doing, and we already up against it as is, as like it's like, man, this is just one more thing that's internal that we can come together and go way farther than we would if we tried to do it by ourselves. And that's absent of religion or community, things like that. Like that's all important, but I think at the end of the day, us just being people of color, like I think that is what allows people to show up and be their authentic selves, and show up and feel comfortable and not feel like they're being judged, and just a free space to really explore themselves and find out, okay, what's really going on here. So from there, that's really where Suhu was born, because I knew from my journey, being on the journey, I knew I had gotten kind of a Rolodex of people where that some were in a room, some were not in a room. Some people were just strictly, working with therapy, and some people were strictly doing talks. Some people had a combination of both. Some people was not doing any of that. But either way it go, I saw people weren't really moving as a collective. And I've always believed, and I've seen the power of collective consciousness, not just in my own life, but in others as well, and just historically. So for me, it was like, man, I just got a feeling like we'll go way farther together, than if we, each trying to figure it out on our own. And so, and I brought people together. And from that very first meeting when we came together earlier this year, it was like, oh yeah, this is
Yeah.
it. It was like this is it. And I've experienced the benefits of it, and so have the other brothers as well. So it's been
Yeah.
great.
No, what a testimony you just shared there of how you found your purpose in this. And it's very interesting how with life, And this is why I know that there is a God and there's a higher power, because we do think we're set off on this one path of, all right, let me go get my degree. Let me go out here in the professional ranks, climb the ladder, etc. But then something happens and we truly get brought to our senses of finding our purpose. And I was listening to something earlier from God. Actually, it was like the suffering, there's a message and there's a meaning in the suffering. Maybe it's used to strengthen you. Maybe it's used
Mhm.
to help you gain endurance, bring you closer, find your purpose. And so for people going through stuff, it's like, hang in there. There is something to be gleaned from this, and it's powerful to hear how you've turned this into a whole mission and into a whole organization to help others. And something else I love that you put it out too. I think it's an African proverb. Like, yeah, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you
Yeah,
want to
exactly.
go together. And so, do you mind speaking to
Hmm.
just that collective part of how Suhu? Did I pronounce the acronym correctly?
Hmm.
How, like, what are
Yes.
the ways and how
So
you
yeah.
help folks collectively in their healing journey, especially when it comes to developing a healthy relationship with sex and sexuality?
Yeah, so what we do is our guiding, lighting principles are love, connection, trust, and growth. And from my experience being on this journey and talking to other people, kind of regardless of your background, that those are really the four things that are essential to any healing journey. And so for me, it was like, kind of regardless of where, you ultimately end up finding yourself on the journey, these four things we can all come to agree upon. And so the work that I do is to create that space for people of color to come in and really explore, judgment free. You're gonna be accepted regardless of whatever your acting out is. Like, it's all the same to us. It's just sexual energy at the end of the day. And like you said, like, you didn't make this conscious choice when you was 11, 12, 13, knowing that this is what this was gonna be. So a lot of times in the work that I'm doing, like, I just get opportunity to see and talk to that, 11-year-old that's in there, that 15-year-old that's in there, that 16-year-old that's, that's in that person, and you'll get to see them come out and share their story, and from a place of grace. And so it allows people to really find out what that path like looks like for them. Like, what does connection look like for you in order for it to be successful? Yeah, this program may say this one journey may say this, but no, come find it for yourself, in a safe space. And so that's really what we emphasize, because everybody's different. So I may need, a couple calls, a day. Some people may need, calls, once a day. Some people may not need a call at all. Some people may just need just a real strong connection, with a group that they go to. They don't necessarily need, a type of daily communication, but you don't know that, unless you feel comfortable enough to do that. And so that's what I really try to emphasize, especially because it being so stigmatized and so taboo within our culture. It was like, man, like, because of that, we have a hard time going to those spaces, like the 12-step spaces, because I know they mean well, but at the end of the day, like, the power of control is not with us. And it wasn't from the beginning, and it's not there now. It's never going to be there. And then it's very hard for us to show up and be our true authentic selves, knowing that there's a possibility that, yeah, we're cool in this room for an hour, but that may not necessarily translate to us being out of here. So, and this is so individualized, it's so internal, it's so personal. Like, this isn't a bottle, this isn't a drug necessarily outside of us. It's within us, and it's a part of who we are at the core. So that also adds to a level of hesitancy to reach out and get help outside of ourselves. And so, with the group, we try to be that, allow us to be that example, to say, okay, you can, you can come and meet yourself where you are, and know that that's okay, because you're around people that are doing the same thing, and everybody has the same goal in mind, which is to get better. And I've just seen it, grow and grow, and help a lot of people, and change a lot of lives in a positive way. So that's really what we emphasize is just giving a space where people can be their true authentic selves, whether they know who that is or not. you know, and we don't, I don't claim to have all the answers, anything like that. And it's coming from brother to brother. There's no hierarchy within this at all. And so for me, one of the most important things is I'm in the trenches right here with you. I'm in the meetings right here with you. I'm in therapy, it's stuff like that right here with you, and so it's not there's no gap in relatability and from shared experience. And that creates a different level of trust. It creates a different level of comfort. It creates a different level of vulnerability that I believe along with me going to school and getting my PhD, it allows me to have both, to be able to hold space for both those energies. And I've seen it just have a dramatic impact. And we don't have, as our culture, like, I don't know if you have had your own CSAT or anything like that,
No, I didn't learn
but
about that until going into the room. So yeah,
bro, it's expensive. Like, you can't, most insurances, you can't bill. If we're talking about specific, sexual recovery, like, you can't bill that in therapy, bro. Like, not right now. And so we have to pay, out of pocket, and it's 3-4 times, what your normal session would be if you could bill it. So it's not really affordable, for us, nor does it have any plan to be, because it's not officially recognized as an addiction within the scholarly places and the scientific places. So, which is a whole nother conversation in itself. But so we don't have a lot of places to turn. And so I thought to myself, like, man, we need a place to turn. We need a place to go, that we can show up. We don't have to navigate or, code switch or anything like that. Like, you can come to yourself from the jump, and you're going to be able to get the resources that you need from the jump, and don't have to waste 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, this is incredible what you're doing. And like, I look how you said, like, hey, we're all in the trenches together and trying to help each other out. The way that you're creating access, I mean, it's good for people to know, like, 12 steps is a free program, but there's other tools and resources that you'll hear promoted out there that, like, hey, some people might not have the resources for a therapist at the moment, or some of these outpatient programs, I think they call them, or upstate
Yeah,
programs that
exactly.
are very
Yeah.
expensive. And so you creating this space for people to get access to something that I also like what you grounded this in too. It's spiritual transformation, because that at our core, that helps us to lead to that behavioral transformation. But there's a lot of work on our
Mm-hmm.
internal, in our spirit, in our soul, in order for us to get there. Because that white knuckling of trying to change a habit, we got to do something more, deeper root work, to really create that change, and the room, the safe space to share and to explore and to talk and to get that collective energy can really help someone build momentum towards that. Donovan, before we get to each one teach one thing I wanted to go back to, and I think is really important for people to know, and you spoke about this, is that this thing is not linear. I have relapsed. I've earlier this year, like, I relapsed on Reddit, clicked down some porn. So I want people to also know, if you don't mind sharing, about how important is it for people to know, like, the journey to healing and recovery, it's not linear. You may have a 90-day streak and something might happen. You might have a 6-month streak, something
Mm-hmm.
might happen. Because I think people also get caught in the shame, and the shame of that, and the guilt of that, if they
Yeah.
relapse and think, like, oh, I've lost all my sobriety, or everything, like, all that equity I built up was for nothing.
No, definitely. So what we try to emphasize is that spiritual progress is what's most important, and sobriety and recovery is a byproduct of that. you know. And so the more and more we focus on, growing spiritually, mentally, and physically every day, the sobriety and the recovery, will come. And for a lot of individuals, I think it's because a lot of now that's also why I'm doing what I do now, because the people that speak out for it is great, and we need more of that. But we also need people that are speaking about the journey in real time, and there's not a lot of that. And so the emphasis on, like you said, that the fact that it's not linear. It's going to be, peaks and valleys, ups and downs, good days and bad days. But as long as you stay on the journey, stay on the journey and stay, have the right support, the progress is definitely going to come. And it may be one of those things that you may not even notice in the moment. And I think that's why the support is so important, because if somebody is just focusing on the relapse or anything like that, they might miss the fact that they're not as selfish as they once were, that they're being more honest, that they're not as that the negative self-talk isn't there the way it used to be. That they're more open, they're more vulnerable. That and even the relapse is not looking the same. I think that's very much underrated in the journey. It's like, okay, yeah, you might have slipped, but did it look like the slip before? If it didn't, then that's progress, you know. And I don't take that lightly at all, especially because in this journey, because the way the shame and guilt is set up, all the wins matter. So we emphasize and celebrate those as well. And just from a bare minimum point of not being isolated, like just a willingness to connect and check in and say you're struggling or having challenges and things like that. Like that's progress in itself, because as long as you have the right, you have the right support system, there's no going back. You know, even on the hard days, it'll never go back to go back to what it once was. As long as you got the right tools and the right support system around you. Like there's no shortcut to willingness. It's a process, like anything else. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take work, but staying with it and counting the small wins, they're definitely going to lead to big ones for sure.
And well said, because that's one thing I hope folks in whatever recovery they're in just know, like, no, you didn't like lose all that equity. The lessons learned, like you said, that
Mm-mm.
all still counts. And so you dust yourself off, you get back on it, and you're still a transformed person for all the experiences that you did connect together in whatever your sobriety streak was. And so I think it's great that we have sobriety like kind of streaks, but it's also like I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
discourage people where if you slip, if you relapse, like that's technically back at one. It's like no, you dust yourself off and you are where you are, but you did grow to a certain point. I'm sure there's insights that you gain from that journey, and now it's like, all right, pick yourself up and you just keep going.
Yeah, especially as long as especially when there's opportunity to learn from it. So if you learn from it and you implement, what you learn, because a lot of times that relapse is somewhat necessary in order to get the lesson that one needs to go in order to, maybe that first streak was 90 days or 120 days, whatever the case may be, but that way that you were going wasn't sustainable for 5 years. It wasn't sustainable for 10 years, and that relapse might have taught you that lesson in order to make that, to get to that long term goal. So it's definitely important to always look at it, as a teachable moment,
Yeah.
for sure.
And last question I'll ask, and then we'll get into the rapid fire questions here, is because we're speaking from this from someone who's like in the rooms, who've got these behaviors that we were in recovery for. But oftentimes there might be someone who's the partner of a person going through
Mm-hmm.
this, and they're like, "Oh, that's my husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it might be. I see that this behavior is in them. I would like to encourage them to take advantage of some of these tools that y'all are talking about, or these 12-step rooms. They see them struggling with these behaviors. Is there anything that you would say or offer to them if they want their loved one to seek help? What advice, insights would you share with them about
Man, I would say be honest, because the key is what you said, is loved one. Like, let's put emphasis on the word loved one, because as I mentioned before, like that's really the first thing that we look at, in the journey, because if we're in this acting out cycle, then there's a part of us that we don't love.
that?
Just being honest. I won't say hate, but there's a part of ourselves that we don't love. And a lot of times a partner can be that person to shed that light on that. And so I would say, be honest. And in my time, a lot of those, and I'm sure you can speak to this as well, a lot of the people that come to those rooms for the first time, it wasn't on their own will, it was
Yeah,
their
yeah.
partner. Their partner got them in the room. Now the partner getting them in the room won't necessarily keep them there, and it won't be the driving force behind long-term recovery. But a lot of times it does get the ball rolling, because being in the midst of the acting out, we built this glass house, and sometimes all it takes is a loved one, to break a window, and all the glass should start breaking and start coming down, because we can't hide from it anymore, because we're starting to see the consequences and the impact of, our actions. So it can play a major part. And I give a lot of credit, honestly, to my partner. She didn't necessarily like say anything at the moment per se, but it was just the thought. It was the thought and the fact of like, man, like, if she did know this is where I was at, how would I navigate it? Like what would I need to do in order to, show up for her and let her know that this is something that, that I take serious, because a lot of times a person, that's in addiction might not love themselves enough to make the change, but they can love their kids enough, or they can love their partner enough, or they can love their family enough. At once they see the real consequences on a magnified scale, at least to get the ball rolling as far as getting help, outside of themselves. And so, to circle back, I would just say, just be honest and say how it's affecting you, and so I know, because a lot of times that betrayal and the distrust and things like that can make it difficult to be supportive, in those moments. But so I have to say, if you're honest, and that person 9 times out of 10, that person is going to receive it, whether they get help in the moment or not. It's going to send them in that direction. If they really do care, about the relationship, and don't want it to fall. So I would say, just be honest and be vulnerable.
Yeah, no, I love that advice. I think that is real, coming from a place of honesty, and the honesty could take many forms because, like you pointed out, everyone has to do the work. Your partner can get you there, and that honesty might be like, hey, if you don't work on this, the relationship's over. Like, I'm done. That might get the person in the room, and they got to do that work. But just to being honest in that could push them in maybe a direction of taking things seriously and really starting to do that introspection and starting to do that work. But we all know it falls on the person to really put in the work to create the change, create that spiritual and behavioral change. So I appreciate your answer there. So last thing, man, we're going to just go into our each one teach one question. So I just got a couple questions for you before we wrap up. So the first one for you, Donovan, is what's one book, podcast, or resource that you would offer that's been a game changer in your journey?
I would say The Spook Who Sat by the Door. That's what I would say, because it helped me in a way that I didn't really think it would, because I was looking at it from when I read it. I was still in corporate, at the time. So I was looking at it from a place of, what can I learn while I'm in these, in these corporate rooms, and take it back to my people, which I very much, do it, kind of continue to do. But it was such a deeper meaning, like, we spoke earlier about the call, and it was like, oh no, I'm actually going into these rooms and learning from, these, and learning, and seeing like, okay, what have they done, for the groups that have figured it out, that have recovered and have recovered collectively. Like, what can I learn to adapt that, for my people and for my culture, which one of those things has been, accountability. Like, a lot of us, which isn't necessarily a part of choice that you have with your sponsor, but that's not necessarily like everybody, doing that for each other per se. But I found that to be very successful for, for our people, that are open to that. So yeah, and along with a lot of other tools that I learned from, the 12-step space, and from, working with the different CSATs, that's certified sex addiction therapists, that, a lot of my people may not ever really have access to it. It got to a point where I was like, all right, man, this is just too much. I can't keep pouring into this financially. But I still have to say, like, a lot of those tools and those resources are sitting around people that were getting better. Okay, I can take this back to my people, and it's been it's been life changing.
So no, I appreciate that resource, and you just sharing like there's just other tools that people can explore, because 12 steps might not be for everyone, but then there's other things that everyone had to kind of figure out what it is for them, or what the combination is
Yeah.
for them.
No, exactly. And to get people, I don't know, one thing I'll add to real quick is to, to help get people in the room as well. Because, people, like you said, there's a lot of misconceptions, things like that. So now I found myself having different conversations with people to let them know, like, oh, no, it's not that. Like, I know it may seem like it's that from the outside, but I'm telling you from a person that's been there. And not only can I tell you, but I can point you to the room that I'm talking about. So you don't have to go on this website and look through 100 pages to find a room that's going to work for you. I'm telling you, these are probably like my top 5, top 10 that you can go to, and this is what the expectation is. Or if you're looking for just a safe space to vent, this is the room. This is the room that you should go to. If you really want to focus on the solution and not the problem, this is the room that you should go to. And so I just found that to be invaluable.
So it's very interesting too with you having a law background. So the next question is, if you could create a law or policy, what would it be?
If I could create a law or policy, that's a good question. If I could create a law or policy, what would it be? Honestly, it would be to make, especially in this day and age of mental health, it would be to make it affordable. I don't know exactly what the language would be per se, but it would definitely be to make it more feasible for those type of special niches that are out of network. You know, like sexual addiction is one of them. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the therapists that don't have that specialization, mean well, but they don't get it necessarily. And the people that do get it, if you don't have, 200 to spare on a consistent basis, you're not going to be able to have access to them. So it would be something to, help change that. And that's actually a part of what I'm going to school for is to kind of work with the DSM and ICD in order to, get that to get sexual addiction, classified in there, because then it would be accepted by insurance companies and within the medical profession. Because right now it's kind of like a big, I don't want to say gatekeeping because that's not the word, but it's financial. That's all I can really say. Like, I think there's a fear on their end that it's because there's a saying that like so many people have this problem, but it's not because it's not officially recognized. They don't have numbers to back it up, on that level. But if this many people have problems and then the insurance companies had to cover that, they would be losing money, you know.
Mm.
And so they're really not incentivized to do it. So I would create some type of law so that we have access to that, to have access to those particular type of resources, because we
Yeah.
need it. Especially our people, like we need it the most. And there's really division, you know, there's division, whether it's even a real addiction or not, within the professional community, which is kind of crazy to me in 2025. But there is a whole group that won't even use that terminology, which I understand and I get it. But who's suffering because of that? Us. And so if I create a law or policy, it would be like, yeah, we done suffering, y'all. Y'all got us fucked up.
Yo, and that's why to me having this conversation was so important, because of the misconceptions out there, because of knowing how many people suffer in this silence that look like you and I, how many families get impacted by this, kids that get impacted by this. It's like, man, I mean, I'm grateful for God put me on this journey of kind of awakening in this area. And okay, I've made my mistakes, I've sabotaged, I've caused a lot of hurt and harm, but now I just want to use whatever time and blessing that I got given, and the blessings of being married and a father now, to just do good, especially in this area of
Mm-hmm.
helping people and supporting people. So, especially making our men healthier and safer. And I feel like, the work that you're doing, man, it's life changing. It's gonna really, it's generation changing for people. So the last question for you, because this season is all about transformation, what's one final piece of advice you would just leave with someone that's struggling with lust but afraid to seek help due to the intense shame, guilt, and just fear of judgment about
I would say all or something. That's what I would say. But and when I say all or something, I'm speaking to, addicts specifically, because a lot of us, deal with some variation of perfectionism. And that if we're not at a place where we feel like we can go all in, or we can do the necessary work, even though we know, like, we can know what the right thing is, but not necessarily have the willingness to do it. But that'll stop us from doing anything, or it'll stop us from doing what we do have the willingness to do. And so I would say all or something. As I mentioned earlier, like, there's really no shortcut. There's no shortcut to willingness. And so I would say, give yourself grace, and, lay yourself and accept yourself, for where you are in the journey. If you are at a space where, you don't have the willingness to go to a room, but, all the self help is all you have the space to do, give yourself the space to do that, unapologetically, and that's okay. If that's where you at, that's where you at. And as long as you do that, things, whether the reality is whether it's the pain that's going to push you in that direction, or you go begin to experience the benefits that's going to want you, and you're going to want to experience more of that, and it's going to pull you in the direction, of getting more help. Or it could be a combination of both. But either way it go is, as long as you're doing something, and not, letting the perfectionism or letting the, letting the addiction, paralyze you, then you on the right track.
Yeah, well put, well put. So final question for you, Donovan, is pretty simple, man. What's next for you? Where can people go to learn more about you, Suhu, and just to get connected to you and all these resources?
Yes, of course. So we have SyncUpHealUp is on, pretty much all the social media platforms under that name: Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, so you can follow us on there. Starting to speak and do educational events and things of that nature. So really excited about that. We'll be posting about that as well. And man, I'll be hitting your line offline, because this will be the next step for me as well. Is, creating a platform, to speak about this more often, and to get more into the nuances of the day-to-day challenges that we have to deal with, and provide, our people solutions for that. That's those are definitely going to be the next steps.
So no, that's exciting, and yeah, you got another soldier here on the battlefield, because and the war is on. So Don,
The war is on, bro.
I just appreciate you, the time, the honesty, the realness, and just this conversation, and the really, for me, like the momentum of this conversation of just helping folks out there in obviously the battle against addiction, but really liberating themselves, developing a healthy relationship with sex and sexuality, because it's a part of our lives and it's not going anywhere. But we want to create a space and a culture for people to heal from maybe the broken foundation that they had of it, but to be able to kind of reclaim themselves and live healthier and safer lives in their engagement, exploration of it, whatever it might be going forward, especially, men. We know women are impacted by it. I think they'll also be touched by this conversation, but I know specifically in the space that
Mm-hmm.
you and I are in, we see a lot of men dealing with this struggle. So it's something that we definitely want to prioritize and help Black and brown men and brothers out there in their recovery. So just appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you, bro. Thank you.
So, folks, that's it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all for your presence and tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please share your support by sharing the Living West Ties podcast, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. Leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube channel, and also be sure to give us a follow on Instagram at Living Once Twice. Reaching out to you all through the time and the space that separates us. Remember, your dream life is waiting for you. It's time to go for it. You deserve it. Catch you later on Living Once Twice.